it's Renato, and I'm here with my friend Jackie. We also have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Terril Nell. Is it okay for us to call you doctor, or should we refer to you as
Can
something else?
say that, but from here on, it should just be Terril.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Terril. At the moment, you are the American Floral Endowment Research Director, but very soon you will no longer be in that position because you will be retired.
Correct.
So we wanted to get Terril on the air and just share a lot about his career because you have such a storied career in the flower industry. And I could honestly say that I've known you as long as my son has been alive. So that's 18 years. And I'm just going to share a quick story. You and your lovely wife, Kathy, were there at a board dinner with myself and Patricia, and she was 8 months pregnant. And, you guys have, were giving some great advice about parenting. And literally 3 days later, Raphael was born after that dinner, and
That's
I know
great.
that you've kept in we've obviously kept in touch throughout those 18 years, throughout my career at SAF, and then even now I'm at BloomNet. So it's just been amazing, and the more I think about it, it's even several years prior to that we've known each other. So do you want to talk a little bit about like just the longevity in your career? I know that's not one of the things that we wanted to ask you about, but it's just amazing.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah. One of the things I'm asked is, how in the world did you ever pick floriculture, or how did you pick horticulture? And it's kind of an interesting journey. One of our neighbors, block away, had an entire extra lot with camellias. It was just, he had probably every camellia variety at the time. And he would invite me to come up. He was retired, and he would germinate the camellia seeds. He would take care of the plants. And I had some interest in that. And my next door neighbor owned a retail florist. And so Louise asked me, once I got my driver's license, would you be interested in delivering flowers for us? And I grew up in Pensacola, and at that time, she was probably only one of 6 or 7 retail florists in Pensacola. And since I was 4th generation Pensacola, I knew the streets of Pensacola pretty darn well. And so I said, sure, I'll deliver flowers. And I learned a lot about delivering flowers to hospitals and to funeral homes and to individual homes. And that was fun. Then at the holidays, when I was out of school, either high school or college, I'd come back and I'd drive during the holidays. And I remember going over to Mobile and picking up poinsettias one year. I'd never seen poinsettias growing. I thought that was kind of nice. And they would always give me the most difficult locations to find in Pensacola because there was no Waze and there was no GPS, and they knew I would find it. So that was kind of the start. But the start I usually tell people is that my grandmother was a gardener, my mother's mother, and she could even grow geraniums in Pensacola, Florida in the summer, and they would flower. And I never knew how. I didn't know that geraniums really weren't supposed to do that at the time, but they're not supposed to grow in Florida in the summer. It's too hot. But she did it. And so one day we were living on one of the bays in Pensacola next to my grandparents at the time. She gave me this packet, this envelope, and I said, what is this? She said, oh, it's marigold seeds. And I said, what do you want me to do with these? She said, go over there, rough the dirt up next to your house, tear this open, sprinkle the seeds, and let's see what happens. Well, darn it if they didn't flower. And that was the beginning of floriculture. But I also spent the summers, in addition to delivering flowers, mowing lawns. And I think one of the things that taught me is that I really did not want to go into landscape maintenance.
It is
Um,
hard work down in Florida, given the heat.
it was hard work.
Yeah.
And my mother also arranged for me to be a carpenter's apprentice a couple of summers with the expansion of the power plant in Pensacola. And I decided I didn't want to be a carpenter's apprentice either, or a carpenter, so took care of that. So I went to Auburn, not knowing what this degree was even called. And that was after my parents tried to talk me out of it, because my grandparents on her side, great grandparents for me, had been farmers. And she said, well, that's just farming. There's no future in that. And so one evening she invited one of her bosses from University of West Florida over, and we had dinner, and I didn't know it, but she had invited this gentleman to come have dinner and actually to talk me out of going into horticulture. So,
Wow.
say there's no future in this. Well, we got to talking about it, and finally he said to my parents, if that's what he wants to do, let him do it. And so they left me alone.
Mhm.
She took me for orientation. What they didn't know at the time is the person she invited over was a very good friend of hers, but he had a master's degree in ag economics. So he understood agriculture and horticulture, and yeah, just let him do it. You never know where it may end. So we met with the dean. The dean said, oh yeah, that's horticulture. And so we went, and I signed up for the first quarter, and that led to the second quarter, and I enjoyed it. And it was the plants, but it's what I ultimately saw in my career. It was plants and it was people. And that's what horticulture is. At Auburn, it was really more landscape horticulture and plant ID, and that really didn't excite me. But I decided I would go and do my master's degree. And I looked at several places. I ended up at North Carolina State University. And my major professor, had never heard of him because I really didn't know floriculture as an undergrad, was a gentleman named Roy Larson. And anybody who was in the industry prior to 2000 or 2005 knew of Roy Larson.
Absolutely.
He wrote a book about floriculture, one of the first books in the last half of that century. But Roy was a classic. He always came to work. He was good Swede, and he would always tell you that. He would always come to work with a tie on, usually about as wide as you could wear a tie or tie a tie. His wife made him with the most outrageous flower fabric you could ever want to see. And I think today the museum at NC State has his entire collection of ties.
Oh, that's cool.
She surely was not going to throw them away. So I'm pretty sure that's where they are. But people called it a master's degree. It was really a 2-year internship in what is floriculture and how do you grow plants. And he taught floriculture, and he believed that you should learn to grow about any plant that you were capable of growing in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so as a graduate student, we were kind of the assistants, and there were 5 of us. And he was the person who actually developed the program to flower azaleas year round. And you fake them into a setting bud and then fake them into flowering, or setting a bud and then putting them in the cooler for simulate winter and take them out and they flowered. And so we pinched a lot of azaleas. We tried different things to do miracles to them, and we put a lot of them in the cooler, now the cooler. So he introduced me to floriculture, and I made a lot of mistakes there. So I finished that and decided I wanted to go for my PhD, and the department chairman, I wanted to stay at NC State because Roy Larson was so good. The department chair said, you know what, I'll give you an assistantship, but right now I will recommend that you not accept it. He said, I want you to apply for 4 or 5 other universities and just see what's there. Take a look. And I did. Michigan State accepted me as a teaching assistant. I later saw the letter that department chair wrote for me for graduate school, and I now understand why they let me into Michigan State. He was a Michigan State grad as well. And so I got there. The person I was working with, I was a teaching assistant, and I did all the floriculture labs for 3.5 years. And went in the first week or so, and I said, "So when do you start the labs, the class in the labs?" He said, "Well, I start the class, you start the labs." And I said, "Well, do you have an outline of what's to be done?" "No." You develop the outline. "Do you have plants ordered, seeds ordered?" "No." Fortunately, at NC State, I had met the people. I knew to call Ecke, I knew to call Ball, and I did. And through that time, they were very generous, and Yoder. They were very generous to provide me what was needed. And we filled greenhouses full of plants. And people said, "We've never seen this before." Well, get ready. This is just the beginning. And so that's how I got into floriculture. And that same department chair moved to Ohio State as dean. He found out I was finishing, and he called. They had a position open. "Come down and I want you to interview for this." And I did, but it was a landscape position, primarily teaching. And one of the faculty members I interviewed with was a guy named D.C. Kiplinger, who also wrote a book. And Kip was famous in floriculture as well. And I'd met him once, maybe twice, for flower judging teams. And so I went into interview with Kip, and Kip looked at me and said, "Okay, I have one question. I only have one question for you." "Okay." He said, "Why in the hell is a good floriculture person interviewing for a landscape position? You have no reason to want to do this position." So that told me a lot. And so I ended up at the University of Florida, and through that time, I had numerous positions, teaching, research, and my last 20 years, I was administration as department chair. And I kept my research program, fortunately.
Well, I have a question from all that, and I've thought about this a lot, because a lot of what you do as research director sounds very scientific and sounds like a scientist. So is there a difference between those two? Are they virtually the same, or can you expand on that a little bit?
Essentially, they're one and the same. I think one other endowment calls their person chief scientist or something like that. I try to stay away from that, because I don't think the industry really wants to talk science. They want to talk results. And by research director, it suggests that I'm directing the research. But at AFE, what I've done, and fortunately the board has allowed me to do it in the research committee, is, and I did this at UF for my entire time there, is I would ask the industry, "What are your problems? What are you struggling with that really you need research on?" And they will tell me, usually. Sometimes I've regretted that they told me, because we couldn't do it. But I've always been honest with people in the industry and say, that's just not something that we can really do any research on. And so we back off that. But I did that in my first 6 months at UF. I went to Yoder Brothers, which was in Fort Myers at the time, 75 acres of chrysanthemum stock and 30 acres of azaleas. And I'd only been at UF 6 months. And I asked the vice president of research for Yoder, I said, "Tell me, what are the top 10 projects or problems?" And they had a nationwide sales staff. I said, "What are the problems that I should be doing research on?" And Carl looked at me and said, "Can you repeat that?" And I did. And he said, "I've never, ever had anybody ask me that." Well, 2 weeks later, he sends me a list of 10 projects. And I think I did 5 or 6 of them. And the beauty of it in working with Yoder Brothers and Polycky Poinsettias and Ball
Mhm.
is they had a sales staff. I did not have to worry totally about getting the information out. If I resolved an azalea issue for Yoder that related to the people they were selling azaleas to, guess what? They gave it to their sales staff, and this is what University of Florida is doing. And so it was a great way of getting the word out.
So you published it, but you literally had already a built-in network of people to really spread the word about your good work. That's great.
Well, that was kind of drilled into me too, that, research results in a file cabinet doesn't do anybody any good.
Absolutely.
And you have to, by university standards, you have to publish scientifically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I get it. It validates the fact that you're doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least the numbers you provided were right. You hope the person took the data correctly. But then to turn it around and put it into a trade magazine article, or now webinars, so industry has ready access, or websites, you know what? It works. What's amazing to me is how many people in the industry right now, and I'm only speaking growers, and I'm only talking about one big project that I think we'll be talking about, is we've gathered after 6 years a heck of a lot of information and research that works. And it surprises me how many people, including sponsors, who are not going to that and using it. It's like, my gosh, we're handing you answers here.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back. This is a one-on-one industry, basically. Let's face it. And if you really want to communicate with people, we can do it like we're doing it now. You're seeing faces, but and you're seeing the real person. And it works so much better than a letter, I think, or even the written word. So you have to get down and personal with some of these things.
Well, so many of us that are in the industry have been in the industry for some time, and from the beginning was never have never been an industry that shared very well
Mm-hmm.
until most recently with technology and the development of being able to communicate like this. We just had ourselves in the back room or in a lab or something like that, and then getting the information out meant that someone had to physically go and look for that information to be able to even find it. Where now we see lots of communication like this, or like you said, webinars and getting the information out is a little bit easier today than it used to be.
Well, let me see if I could pull out the segue. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terril.
Jackie, I'm sure you see this in all of your, training that you're doing. Is if you go into one shop, they will tell you, hey, we're having this problem. If you go in and you're doing a program and there's 30 companies in the audience, nobody's going to tell you they have a problem. Everything's just perfect.
Absolutely. That is absolutely right. We don't want to share the problems. We tend to share stories about consumers and situations like that, but never challenges that we're finding on our own.
I mean, I've seen some situations. When we were first doing cut flower research back in the late 90s, and I would go to the American Floral Endowment Board meetings, since they were sponsoring it, and give them updates because it was a big project and they wanted to know exactly what we were doing. And we had said, don't dare cut flowers underwater. Gave the results, and it really was pretty bad. And one of the people there was a retailer, and that individual was nice, and yet I was taken to task. Are you telling me that I'm paying a person in a back room every day to spend their day cutting my flowers underwater, and I shouldn't be? I said, well, that's what the research results show. And we've tested it in retail or actually in wholesale at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'll make a deal with you. And the individual said, okay. I said, you go back and you stop that person from doing that for a month and just have the person cut the flowers dry and put them directly into a bucket with cold water, with flower food, the whole thing. And the individual said, okay, I'll do it. We'll talk in a month. I called the individual back and she said, darn, you were right.
So could you name names? I'd like to know who that retailer is.
So it takes a few of those, but every now and then you win one, and you get somebody who really believes in what you're doing.
Well, speaking of retailers, and I'm just going to jump up to something I wanted to ask you a little later, but I think it's appropriate now. You are the only academic that has ever served as president for the Society of American Florists. So I know people may think that that's predominantly a retail organization, but it represents the entire industry: growers, wholesalers, academics, as well as retailers, of course. And you shared that really remarkable story of even before you got into floriculture, you were working at a flower shop. And now I think that's really the secret of why you have such a great affinity and relationship with all these florists. But how is it like serving as president of the Society of American Florists as the only academic president?
Yeah, interesting question. And I guess in some ways, initially, I may have worried about it, but I had already been on the board for probably 8 years at that point. And there was not a place on the board according to the bylaws. It was 1/3 grower, 1/3 wholesaler, and 1/3 retailer. And at one of the annual meetings, there was an amendment to the bylaws that the board could appoint an academic person to be on the board. And it passed. Nobody knew. I didn't know. I was there in the audience. I thought, well, that's nice that they're talking about that. And so that was on Saturday morning, the SAF convention. And that afternoon, I forget who talked to me, but, we just passed this. And how would you like to be on the board? And I said, sure. And that was the same time we were seeking money from Congress dedicated to research in floral and nursery. And somehow I was in the group that went to SAF first, going back, get this, 1989 or 90. And from those first couple of meetings, I was asked if I would be involved with SAF, and they needed a spokesperson on Capitol Hill. So I think that's how I got into this slot on the board, because they knew me. And so, yeah, I stepped in, but, I never felt that anyone on the board viewed it as industry and non-industry, the academic. They accepted me as a person. And I think it's because I so strongly believed in that there has to be positive communication and interaction between university faculty and industry. When there's a divide, a separation, an unwillingness to talk, we don't go anywhere. Let's face it. So through those 8 years, I'd seen a lot. I knew a lot of the wholesalers and retailers. I was asked, and for the president position, or president-elect, it's not an appoint thing. The board appoints, but it's not just we pick Ronaldo, or we pick Jackie, or we pick Terril. 2 or 3 people say, yes, I'm interested. And there's a form you fill out, pretty heavy duty questions. And I was able to respond to those in an industry way because I'd been so involved. And so the board picked me, and I was president-elect for 2 years, president for 2 years, and chairman of the board for 2 years. And at that point, I went back to doing nothing. Not really. I didn't do nothing. I went back to doing my research and writing publications and trade magazine articles and things like that.
We've talked a good amount about the various places that you've moved around and your length of time in various positions, and we never accomplished that without having a good support team. So I'm assuming during that time somewhere you must have met your beautiful wife, Kathy, and have had a couple of daughters, I believe. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your family?
Okay, that's a good one. They are very, very much involved in this and have been. At SAF, I'd always been hesitant to mention this, but I thought, it's time. I said that through the years, Kathy has been, a tag team with me, and not only going through greenhouses, and even as undergrads at Auburn, they allowed her to go on the field trips to nurseries in Mobile. And she was so proud that she learned what Nandina was. And she felt that she could prove herself as not a sociology major, but as a horticulture student, that she'd go into a nursery and say, "Oh, that's Nandina domestica."
That's awesome.
So she really got into it. And but I admitted that through the years, she's been my ghost editor. She's a great writer. And if we were going somewhere and there was a garden, she knew we were going to go to the garden. I was fortunate enough in 1986, 87, well, I guess through 89, to have been selected to be part of the Kiplinger Chair at Ohio State. And there were 3 others, and we were all selected to write a book. And the book was being published, there were 4 of them, they were being published by Ball Publishing. And so my job was the book on care and handling of flowering potted plants. We had a format. It was a strict format. And so I did the easy ones first. I did chrysanthemum, poinsettia, azalea. Then I got to cyclamen and potted rose, and there was nothing. There was virtually no information. There might have been one publication in those times. And so Harry Tiama, who was in charge of the Kiplinger Committee at Ohio State, Mark Cathy, who was at the National Arboretum, and Paul Ecke were on the committee. I think there were 1 or 2 other people, but they ruled the committee, let's face it. And so Paul said, "Hey, we got to have this information. Where can you go to do this?" And I had seen the post-harvest facilities at a research station that actually is no longer in business in Holland. It was in Aalsmeer, about 3 blocks from the auction. Beautiful facilities that when I was there, they really weren't even being used before I went. And Paul said, "Well, why don't you go to Holland, where you can get all the plants you need of anything you need, and you can do the work there if they'll let you do it." I said, "Well, I can ask." And they said, "Sure, come on over." And so between the Kiplinger Chair, American Floral Endowment that had a study abroad program for faculty at the time, I'm sure the Ecke Foundation, and I don't know who else, they came up with the money. And in March of 1988, Kathy and the girls and I flew to Holland, and we spent 6 months there. And that's where everybody really got into this, because Kirkenhof Gardens was there, which is 52 acres of flowering bulbs for, I think, 7 weeks. And so we bought annual passes, and I'd come home from the research station about 5. Days were getting longer. It didn't get dark until 8:30 at that time. And we would have a quick dinner and go to Kirkenhof and just walk and get coffee or get Coke for the girls. And you had to have a piece of Dutch pie or something. And so that was fun. And greenhouse after greenhouse, I can't imagine how many hours Kathy and the girls have spent going through various greenhouses and gardens. And I mean, they know that I like flowers. Every now and then for Father's Day or something, they'll send me flowers. But the most rewarding thing of all that is we talk about, the millennials or the next generations, liking flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And our oldest daughter is now in Asheville, works from home as an insurance adjuster. And, she goes to the grocery store, to Publix once a week. And she has started buying a very nice, from the time she moved in her townhome over a year ago, a very nice bouquet, probably the nicest one they have. And she puts it on her coffee table and she says, "This makes me happy. I'm cheerful every day." And I'm thinking, yes, something worked. So yeah, Jackie, they have been a very, very strong part of this. And
like, to that point, Terril, it's interesting because, I consider you a very good friend, but I also consider Kathy a very good friend, just because we've spent and she spent so much quality time with your peers that they all know her as a friend
mm-hmm.
as well. So I think that's really a testament to what you just shared about her being involved and being at your side and supporting you for all these years. So we talked a lot about Society of American Florists.
About what?
About SAF, Society of American Florists, and we hung out this past summer in Phoenix together at the last convention, and lo and behold, they bestow upon you the highest honor that anyone could achieve in the flower industry, and you received the floriculture, or you were inducted into the Floriculture Hall of Fame, and it's the industry's greatest honor, and it recognizes individuals who exemplify floriculture's highest standards of service and responsibility. I was fortunate enough to be seated just a few seats away from you, and I was able to witness, your very sincere reaction to receiving that award, and I was really touched by it. But could you share a little bit more about what went through your mind and what you felt, receiving such a wonderful honor?
Yeah, what does it mean to you?
Well, it was a surprise. I did not know in advance. And I guess everybody says, well, it's a humbling experience. Yes, it's a humbling experience. But that's old hat. It's what people say. But I agree. It was such an honor because I saw for 30 years people receive that award that I had a huge amount of respect for and understood, why they received it. And I immediately thought of Kathy and the girls, who I acknowledged. And I think the part that got to me is, yes, I received the award, but I'm just the person. It was my staff and my graduate students, my undergraduate students, and my industry friends. And I know I emphasize that because this industry is very, very friendly. I mean, we're competitive, let's face it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need something, there are people in the industry who will help you make it happen. And so it becomes friends. You may only see those friends 2 or 3 times a year, or even one time a year at SAF. But you know what? You don't forget who they are. And you don't forget what they did. And I know when I became president, I was not willing for Peter Moran and Drew Grunberg, just send somebody a letter saying, would you be willing to run on the board, for the board? Or would you be willing to be on a committee? I think I had 45 calls to make. And I wanted to talk to those people individually. And that was such a neat experience because they didn't know who I was, and most of them, and I didn't know who they were, you know. So it was a good interaction, and it made for, a good time once if they were elected or they were if they did agree to be on a committee, that I'd made that contact with them. But I think it was the friendship and um, the fact that yes, I was the person receiving that award, but it came about because of others in the industry or others in my family. And I think I told this story. Um, I know I said something about my grandmother and the package of seeds, but I kind of hate that my parents aren't here because my mother would have said, maybe that was okay for you to do that. But and I went to Pro Flora. I don't think either one of you were at Pro Flora in Bogota. And Kathy and I actually go to Pro Flora, and we've made a great number of friends in Colombia through the years. And so we go to that trade show, and I went back a second time in October. So 2 trips to Bogota in October to meet with their board. And during Pro Flora, they had a dinner that was anybody and everybody with trade associations and the media and all from around the world. And during that, they gave me a plaque for my 25 years of leadership involvement with their industry. And yes, I was asking them to continue supporting research at AFE. But I also wanted to acknowledge, and with that one, I actually became somewhat emotional because it had been 25 years with people. You have to understand Colombia, people who want to know who you are, and they want to be, hey, tell us about yourself. They want to tell you about their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd done that for 25 years. And so this board of around the table and others, about 30 people, I acknowledged that award, but I said, this idea of stepping out and being retired, I'm gonna miss my friends. And through 25 years, I knew probably 80% of the people around the table. And I said, I'm gonna miss my friends. And you as friends, because Kathy and I come down here, have almost become family. And it's really true. And so I think that's the one downside of this thing called retirement. I'm gonna miss seeing my friends, at trade shows and so forth. But I've told people, if phone rings and you see an ID and it's me, just answer the phone.
Well, Terril, I have a very strong feeling that you won't miss your industry friends too much because I could vouch that there are a lot of folks who have retired that still keep in very good touch with one another.
Oh yeah.
So I have a feeling that you'll still be in circulation.
Yeah. In fact, there's 4 of us talking about doing another European cruise next September, and you know all 4 of them.
I know those folks. That's awesome. That's awesome, Terril. So we always ask.
In fact, one of them is a new grandfather, as of 2 days ago.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Happens to live in Colorado.
We always ask each guest one last question. If you could share one thing about the flower industry that is of interest to you with our listeners and viewers, what would that be?
It won't come as any surprise after everything else I've said that if there's one thing I would suggest to anybody, it would be yourself. Get to know the people in the industry, share things with them and let them share things with you that will make both of you better people, because we go so much further cooperating than we do competing. We can have our days of competing, but when it all comes down to it, we're all in this to have a better industry. And having a better industry means that everyone sells more flowers. I hope it means everybody sells better flowers. As a care and handling guy, I hope that. And it only comes by having that interaction and that cooperation. So I would say, do that, make friends, get to know people, and you'll get great ideas that you can use, and they may give you great ideas that you can use.
Very sound advice.
Yeah.
We have just one more thing that we would like to do. The BloomNet Floriology Perennial Award was created as a way to honor individuals who are passionate about the floral industry, have dedicated their lives to enhancing it, have given of their time and knowledge, committed themselves and their energies to growing the industry, and touched numerous people along the way during their lifetime of service to the industry. As we have just heard, you have spent your career in service to the floral industry, have consulted for growers, wholesalers, and retailers nationally and internationally, have co-authored books, served as president of SAF, educated and trained hundreds of students, and have prepared them to go on to their own careers in the floral industry, have helped to raise millions of dollars in support of research with the American Floral Endowment, and you were just inducted into the Floriculture Hall of Fame by SAF. Need we provide any more proof of why you have been selected as the 2023 recipient of the BloomNet Floriology Perennial Award?
Gosh.
We honor you and appreciate everything that you have done for the industry.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you so very much. That's very kind of you.
It's something that we didn't have much of a struggle when we talked about it and were selecting candidates. We both have the distinct honor of considering you a friend, and have worked and have not just worked with you, but also spent time having meals and laughing and doing lots of things in the industry. So you will definitely be missed, but we know that there might be a cabin that we need to come and visit,
So go visit
in the very near future.
Yeah, real soon.
I'll find my friends, and I tell a number of people with projects that I've been involved with or trying to start new projects. If there's some individual who needs to talk, let's talk. I'm not going to not answer the phone. It's just I will not have a formal role. So, that's one thing that I probably should have said, the advice, and that would be get involved. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get involved with organizations, and it'll be a better choice for you. So, but yeah, retirement, a little strange, but I'm not going away. I don't think I'm going away. I plan to be right here, kicking every morning, probably getting up and reading my same floriculture newsletters, and probably sending people emails saying, "Have you thought of this?" So,
well, we certainly appreciate you spending time with us today and sharing some of your knowledge. We could listen to your stories all day. And appreciate it, and it brings so much light into this incredible industry that we all happen to be involved in.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the honor and the award.
So if you've been listening to this podcast via audio, we do have a video version of it. We publish this on Facebook at the Floriology Facebook page, also on our YouTube channel. Terril, such a great pleasure to reconnect with you again. Thank you again. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Deserved. Jackie, any parting words for our audience here?
Well, as always, we like to just remind you that there's no use crying over spilled petals.
Well, we're going to try to keep going. Okay. Thank you so much.